Everyone acts based on their own good reasons. Their behavior or their words or their beliefs might appear to us to be unjustified or even bewildering, but I choose to believe that we all act based on something that feels logical or aligned to ourselves moment to moment. And looking for these good reasons, well, that can be a life changer. Welcome. You're listening to This Leader, the podcast. If you lead people and are seeking the transformational, high-impact secrets that will lead to greater joy and fulfillment in your work, will optimize your team performance, and will help you create a happy, highly productive workplace, then you are this leader and you're in the right place. I'm your host, Claire Laughlin, and each week my guests and I will explore the mindsets, techniques, and actionable strategies that will help you build the career, team, and organization of your dreams. Because I believe no one should have to suffer in a dysfunctional workplace. Let's get started. Hello, friends. Hey, have you ever been grossly and negatively misinterpreted? I mean, really misjudged in a way that felt like a punch to the gut? Let me take you back to a moment that still kind of makes my chest tighten when I think about it. A number of years ago, a colleague accused me of stealing a client from her. Now, this was factually wrong. I had actually been working with the client for years before I'd even met this colleague. But beyond the facts, what really hurt was the way she approached it. She came at me with like a full accusation, no curiosity, none of this, hey, Claire, I'm confused about something. Can we talk? There was no suspension of her own story, even for a moment. She was absolutely certain that I was unethical and she had zero interest in my perspective or experience. That accusation immediately put me in a defensive position. I remember it like it was yesterday. And even as I tried to explain my perspective to her and give her the benefit of the doubt because she had been going through a tough time, she was unbending. And the trust between us truly was destroyed. Our very promising professional relationship ended over something that wasn't even true. But here's what interests me most about this situation. We all sort of tell stories about what's happening in our world, but they're just stories. The process of perception, by its very nature, is removed from, cold, hard reality because the process is itself our brain constructing a narrative about what it selects to pay attention to. In this case, my colleague never entertained that her version could be anything less than 100% accurate. And it was this combination, her certainty about her interpretation, plus feeling, that she had the upper hand, that she was somehow superior or more ethical than me. That was the real nail in the coffin of our relationship. Today, I want to talk about something that could have saved that relationship and countless others. And that is understanding that everyone acts from their own, what I call good reasons, and how changing the way we interpret other people's behavior can be in our own best interests. And it can transform our leadership, our relationships, and our lives. So let's start with what I believe is a fundamental truth about human behavior. People don't wake up in the morning plotting to be difficult, unreasonable, or destructive. I choose to believe that. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, Claire, you haven't met my Uncle Bob, who ruins every family gathering, or my coworker, Steve, who I'm certain is out to destroy me, or, whatever the story is. But stick with me here. Research in motivation psychology, particularly self-determination theory, developed by Edward Deci and Richard Ryan, shows us that all human behavior is driven by three basic psychological needs: autonomy, which is feeling in control of our choices; competence, which is feeling capable and effective; and relatedness, which is feeling connected to others. When someone acts in a way that seems irrational or even harmful, they're usually trying to meet one of these fundamental needs. They're operating from what I call, their good reasons. This doesn't mean that their behavior is justified or that we have to accept it. Let me be clear. But accepting this fact that people act for good reasons, essentially, or reasons that seem good to them, can change everything about how we respond. So think about it. Here's some examples. Like when someone is micromanaging, they might be trying to feel more competent or in control. When someone is being accusatory or defensive, they might be protecting their sense of relatedness or autonomy. When someone seems to be undermining a project, they might be trying to demonstrate their competence, albeit in a misguided way. My colleague who accused me, I'm sure she was operating from her own good reasons too. I mean, maybe she felt threatened about her client relationships, or maybe she was worried about her business security. Maybe she'd been burned before. I'll never know because she never shared her reasoning. But I'm confident she wasn't acting from pure malice. Think about it. When you've been misjudged, could you trace a line backwards in time and find your own good reasons? Even if you had a moment where you just wanted to, stick it to someone, I'll bet that was motivated by other good reasons, like trying to protect yourself or to reestablish connection. Look, we aren't always skillful in how we get our needs met. None of us is free and clear from that. But under the surface, it's really about trying to get our needs met. So here's my theory. Everyone acts based on their own good reasons. Again, their behavior or their words or their beliefs might appear to us to be unjustified or even bewildering, but I choose to believe that we all act based on something that feels logical or aligned to ourselves moment to moment. And looking for these good reasons, well, that can be a life changer. So this brings me to what I call the eye-to-eye gap. And it's the gap between our interpretation of someone's action and their intention. Okay? So we see an action, we interpret that action, and we believe that our interpretation equates to their intention. But clearly, that's not always the case. So remember, a person acts, they behave in some way or another. We interpret, and then we assume that our interpretation equals their intention. But psychology research shows us that we are wired to get this wrong. So let me share a few key biases that sabotage our ability to see clearly. First, naive realism. This is a theory identified by Lee Ross and Andrew Ward, and it describes our tendency to believe that we see the world objectively, while others who disagree with us are uninformed or irrational or biased. I mean, we see this everywhere. Just pay attention to how you interpret someone who has a differing political or religious belief from your own. Those are trigger points. Don't you just think for a minute that they probably would agree with you if only they had the right information? That, my friends, is naive realism. My colleague, she was certain that her story was the truth, not just her truth. The good news is that when we understand this dynamic and we know it's at play, we can combat it and we can reverse it. Here's another one, confirmation bias. This was extensively studied by Raymond Nickerson, and it means that we seek information that confirms what we already believe, and we ignore information that contradicts it. Like once my colleague had decided that I was acting unethically, she probably filtered everything through that lens. And of course, I don't know this, but she may have even gone back through memories and reinterpreted other interactions through that negative lens. We can all fall prey to that pattern. If you combine that with naive realism, we think we're right, and then we continue to see evidence that, in fact, we are right. Okay, here's another. The fundamental attribution error. This is another way our brains can deceive us. This was discovered by social psychologist Lee Ross in 1977, and it shows that we tend to attribute other people's behavior to their character while attributing our own behavior to circumstances. For example, here's an easy one. Like when a colleague misses a deadline, we might think to ourselves, that they're disorganized or unreliable or something like that. But when we miss a deadline, we think, well, I had 3 urgent and unexpected client calls and my computer crashed or something like that, right? So this theory tells us that we assume another person's negative behavior reflects who they are, while our behavior reflects what's happening to us or what happened to us. It's external. So again, we have to be very careful of these patterns. And finally, there's the hostile attribution bias. And this was first identified by Nasby, Hayden, and DePaulo in 1980. And this describes our tendency to interpret ambiguous behavior or situations as having hostile intent, especially when we're stressed or already feeling threatened for any reason. For example, if my colleague was already stressed about her business or something in her own life, which I believe she was, that likely contributed to her negative interpretation of my actions and her accusatory stance. If my actions seemed ambiguous to her or she wasn't sure, then sort of automatically this could have kicked in and had her sort of double down on her interpretation that something I did was wrong. And here's the kicker, my friends. Our brains, they are specifically wired to detect threats. This negativity bias means that we pay more attention to negative information than possible positive information because just think about it. In evolution, missing a threat could be fatal, while missing an opportunity, well, that was just disappointing. So all of this means that we're walking around with brains that are primed to misinterpret others' behavior in the most negative way possible. So you might be thinking, I don't do that. But except me, I don't do that. But believe me, you do. We all do. Hopefully, you've learned to pay attention to these patterns and consciously reverse them because that's absolutely possible. And that's the path. But that doesn't mean that they're still not at play in some subtle ways. And when we acknowledge that, we can continue to be diligent and work to diffuse these patterns. Now, let's talk about what this does to us emotionally and cognitively. When I hold negative interpretations, when I assume that someone is being difficult or selfish or incompetent or out to get me, I feel fear to some regard, right? I fear that they'll derail my project, or I fear that they don't respect me, or that I won't get my place at the table. I fear that I can't trust them. I fear that I need to protect myself. There's some little seeds of fear there. And neuroscience research shows us that when we are in fear mode, our amygdala, that primitive alarm system we all have, it takes over. Blood flow decreases to our prefrontal cortex. That's, right in front there. And that's the part of our brain that's responsible for rational thinking and problem solving and creativity. Dr. Daniel Siegel calls this flipping your lid. And he used that to describe when the emotional brain hijacks the rational brain. That's when the amygdala takes over and the rational brain goes dark. Studies by neuroscientist Matthew Lieberman at UCLA shows that when we're in this threat state, our cognitive capacity is significantly reduced. We literally cannot think as clearly. But when I practice catching myself in negativity and instead flexing my muscles of positive interpretation, that is, when I assume that people have good reasons and I assume positive intent, I feel equanimity. I feel calm, balanced, and grounded. So I often think to myself, and I've practiced and practiced and practiced, but I think to myself, okay, just like me, they have good reasons for their actions. Even if I don't like it, even if I don't agree with it, and even if I wish it would stop, they are acting from what they consider to be good reasons. Research by Barbara Fredrickson on positive emotions shows us that this state of equanimity actually broadens our thinking. Her broaden and build theory demonstrates that positive emotions expand our awareness and build our psychological resources. We become more creative, more collaborative, and better at problem solving. So that's the thing. Even though I'm choosing to believe in people at the risk of being wrong, because I could certainly be wrong, it benefits me. I get the positive result of having a more open mind and greater access to calm feelings, lower stress, and better problem solving abilities. I have to say that again. I choose to believe in people at the risk of being wrong because it benefits me. A study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that people in positive emotional states were significantly better at integrative thinking. And that's seeing connections and finding win-win solutions and thinking long term. And Amy Edmondson's research on psychological safety at Harvard shows that teams where team members assume positive intent and give each other the benefit of the doubt dramatically outperform teams operating from suspicion and negative interpretation. Okay, so have I made my case here? Because this is what I've learned. The story I tell myself about someone else's behavior directly impacts my ability to lead effectively. Choose a better story, and you'll have a better life. So, how do we bridge this gap, this eye-to-eye gap, this difference between how we interpret something and possibly someone's interpretation? How do we move from automatic negative interpretation to curious positive assumption? Because we need to practice. Here are 3 strategies I want you to try this week. Strategy number 1, the pause and reframe. When someone does something that triggers a negative interpretation on your part, just pause and ask, what good reason might this person have for acting this way? Maybe they're overwhelmed. Maybe they lack information. Maybe they're trying to protect something important to them, or maybe they're just not thinking it through. This doesn't excuse problematic behavior. We still need our boundaries, but it opens up possibilities for productive conversation instead of defensive confrontation. Strategy number 2, ask a curious question. Instead of jumping in with your dukes up, try to ask genuine questions. Say, help me understand your perspective on this, or what's most important to you in this situation, or hey, what's happening for you right now, or how did you arrive at that belief or that thought, or what am I missing here? Anything that comes in as curious instead of accusatory back. Like when we get accused of something negative or when we see something negative, just don't forget that we have this propensity to start to defend ourselves. And that, my friends, is a moment where we want to lead with curiosity. I mean, if my colleague would have said to me, Claire, I'm confused about the situation with this client. Can you help me understand the history? Because the way I'm seeing it, it doesn't look so good, right? If she could have just said that instead of you stole my client, basically, our future could have been very different. The story I'd be telling would be very different right now. And strategy number 3, I want you to give them the benefit of the doubt. Consciously choose to assume positive intent until you're really sure that you're proven otherwise. This doesn't mean being naive. It means giving people the same grace that you'd want when your own good reasons aren't obvious to them. Really understand when you jump straight in with an accusation and when you're fixed minded about what exactly something means or someone else's intention is, and especially when you've put yourself in the superior position, you are setting yourself up for conflict and you, my friend, are diminishing trust. Instead, I want you to take the high road. Pause and reframe and ask a curious question. Give them the benefit of the doubt and say to yourself, just like me, they probably have a good reason. Here's what I want you to remember. Behind every behavior is a human being operating from what they consider to be their own good reasons. Those reasons might not make sense to you. They might not be the reasons you'd have, but they're real and valid to that person. And when we lead from this assumption, when we bridge the gap between our interpretations and other people's intentions with a positive story, we create the psychological safety that allows relationships to deepen, teams to thrive, and conflicts to become curious conversations. Here's a challenge for you this week. Pay attention to your interpretations. When you find yourself making negative assumptions about someone's behavior, pause and ask yourself, okay, what good reason might they have? And then get curious and try to find out. This curiosity alone will allow you to develop a deeper understanding of another person, and that's good. Because the person you're judging harshly might just surprise you, and you might discover that the story you were telling yourself was wrong. Thanks for listening to This Leader. Please, please, please share this with others. We are trying to grow our reach and make a positive impact, and we deeply appreciate you sharing. Now, my friends, go lead the way. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. To learn more about my services and for lots of free resources and additional tools to enrich your journey, visit my website and subscribe to my newsletter at clairelaughlin.com. If you have a question about leadership, teams, or organizational culture you'd like me to address on the podcast, please reach out to me at support@clairelaughlin.com and connect with me on social channels @ClaireLaughlin Consulting. Until next time, lead the way.